Before Africa was divided by foreign hands, it was a continent of kingdoms, trade routes, empires, and rich civilizations. But in the late 19th century, a storm was brewing in Europe, one that would forever change Africa's fate. This is the untold story of how an entire continent was stolen without a single battle on its soil. This is the scramble for Africa. The Berlin Conference. Africa was not invited. In 1884, in a cold room in Berlin, Europe's most powerful men gathered to decide the fate of a continent that none of them truly understood. This is the story of betrayal, greed, and the carving of Africa, without a single African in the room. By the late 1800s, Europe was hungry for rubber, gold, ivory, and power. Industrial revolutions demanded resources. Empires craved expansion. Africa, vast and rich, became the prize. In November 1884, German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck invited 14 European nations and the United States to Berlin. Their goal: avoid war over Africa by dividing it like slices of a cake. No African leaders were invited. No kings, no chiefs, no elders. The continent's future was redrawn without a single African voice. Borders ignored cultures, languages, and history. Britain claimed East and Southern Africa. France took the West. Belgium, under King Leopold II, seized the Congo, not for Belgium, but for himself. The continent was carved like meat on a platter. Leopold called it the Congo Free State. But it was anything but free. His soldiers cut off hands of workers who didn't meet rubber quotas. 10 million died in one of history's forgotten genocides. African kingdoms sent envoys, wrote letters, pleaded for peace. They were ignored. Their words never made it past European ears. Their lands, cultures, and sovereignties reduced to zones of profit. By 1900, over 90% of Africa was under European rule. Entire civilizations disrupted, languages outlawed, cultures demonized. But seeds of resistance were already beginning to grow. Africa was not at the table, but it was on the menu. The Berlin Conference set in motion a century of pain, resistance, and survival. But this is not where the story ends. To understand Africa today, we must first confront the lies told about its past. How Africa resisted colonization. They came with guns, lies, and flags. But Africa did not kneel quietly. From mountains to coasts, from forests to deserts, resistance blazed across the continent. This is the story of defiance, of warriors, kings, queens, and common people who stood against an empire. In Ethiopia, Emperor Menelik II saw what was coming. He armed his people, trained his army, and read the treaties they tried to twist. At the Battle of Adwa in 1896, Ethiopian forces crushed the Italian army. It was a victory that shocked Europe and gave Africa hope. In West Africa, Samurai Touré built a powerful empire through trade and strategy. When the French came, he fought them for over 16 years, using guerrilla tactics and diplomacy. In today's Nigeria, Queen Amina of Zazzau had already built walls and commanded armies centuries before colonizers arrived. And when they did, new queens like Ya Asantewa of the Ashanti took up arms. In 1900, she led the Ashanti Rebellion against British forces, declaring, "If the men will not fight, I will." In the south, Shaka Zulu had long before revolutionized African warfare. His legacy inspired later Zulu uprisings, as well as resistance in Zimbabwe by the Shona and Ndebele under leaders like Mbuya Nehanda and Lobengula. Resistance wasn't only on battlefields. It was in poems, prayers, schools, and silent sabotage. Africans refused to be erased. They protected languages, passed down stories, and sang songs of freedom in secret. This was not a silent suffering. It was an unrelenting resistance. They may have lost battles, but they planted seeds that would one day grow into liberation movements. The scramble for Africa was not one-sided. The spirit of resistance burned brightly, and it still does. Divide and rule. How Europe controlled Africa. When brute force wasn't enough, Europe turned to deception. They called it civilizing, but it was divide and rule, the silent weapon of empire. They separated tribes, favored some over others, and planted seeds of distrust that still grow today. In Nigeria, the British ruled indirectly, giving power to certain chiefs while weakening others. They labeled some tribes loyal and others hostile. In Rwanda, the Belgians created ID cards based on ethnicity, Hutu or Tutsi, drawing artificial lines that would later explode in genocide. They made Africans speak foreign languages, swear loyalty to foreign kings, and believe foreign religions. In Congo, they taught the children to hate their own culture and worship their oppressors. They created a world where African identity was punished, and European mimicry was rewarded. Schools erased heritage, churches demonized traditions, and media portrayed Africans as inferior, uncivilized, and incapable. But beneath the surface, resistance simmered. African intellectuals wrote, questioned, and remembered. Secret schools taught truth, and griots, poets, and parents kept the stories alive. Divide and rule was designed to make Africans forget who they were, and to ensure they never united. But they underestimated the power of memory, the economic theft of a continent. They said they came to civilize, but they came to steal. The real reason for the scramble for Africa was greed. Gold, diamonds, rubber, oil, cocoa, cotton. Europe carved the continent to feed its factories and fill its vaults. In Congo, King Leopold turned forests into death camps. For every ton of rubber, thousands of hands were severed. In South Africa, diamonds and gold were dug from the earth by black laborers under brutal conditions, enriching empires abroad. In Ghana, cocoa wealth left the country poor while Britain grew fat. Colonial railways weren't built for Africans. They were built to move resources from mines to ports. The ports were lifelines, not for Africans, but for Europe's industries. Even taxes were twisted. Africans were forced to pay money, but the only way to earn it was by working in colonial enterprises. It was theft disguised as development. Colonizers called it progress, but they owned the companies, the land, the banks, the schools. Africans became labor without rights, consumers without wealth, and tenants on their own soil. Every profit flowed out. Every loss stayed behind. Even after independence, debt and unfair trade kept the pipeline open. And still today, Africa bleeds wealth through exploitative contracts, foreign control, and corporate colonialism. The scramble never ended. It just changed names. But truth exposes theft. The scramble's legacy in modern Africa. The scramble may be history, but its shadow still lingers. Borders drawn by Europeans still divide families, tribes, and nations. Not by logic, but by colonial convenience. Conflicts rage where lines were never meant to be. In some countries, 5 major languages compete for power, none of them African. Roads still lead from mines to ports, not between towns. Schools still teach European heroes, not African ones. Laws, written by colonizers, remain untouched. Courts favor those who speak the old imperial language. Even democracy itself was copied, not rooted. The result? A continent trapped in someone else's blueprint. The economy remains extractive. Africa grows what it doesn't eat, eats what it doesn't grow. We export raw materials and import finished goods, just as we did a century ago. Multinational corporations dominate land, water, and wealth. Youth unemployment rises while our resources build foreign tech, foreign luxury, foreign empires. And yet, Africa is blamed for its own wounds. The media calls us corrupt, unstable, broken. But it was never broken by us. The scramble broke it, and never truly ended. The legacy lives in systems, symbols, and scars. But memory is power. Untold African heroes of resistance. They tried to erase their names, but Africa remembers. The scramble for Africa was met not with silence, but with fire. From queens to generals, from farmers to poets, resistance rose across the continent. In Angola, Queen Nzinga outwitted the Portuguese with diplomacy and defiance. In Ethiopia, Emperor Menelik crushed Italy at the Battle of Adwa, a victory that shook every European throne. In the Zulu kingdom, Shaka's legacy inspired military genius long after his death. In Algeria, Abdelkader led years of guerrilla war against the French. In modern Ghana, Ya Asantewa raised an army when the British stole the Golden Stool, fighting not just for land, but for honor. These were not rebels. These were freedom fighters, thinkers, builders. Many fought with weapons, others with words. Samurai Touré, who built a West African empire, resisted for over 15 years. Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, a Nigerian mother and teacher, challenged colonial patriarchy and built schools for girls. Africa resisted, in battlefields, in books, in spirit. And even when the guns fell silent, the resistance continued. Through songs, stories, memory, colonizers had the power, but Africans had the soul. And now, the world is beginning to listen. Reclaiming our history. Africa speaks back. For centuries, others told Africa's story. They called us savages, tribes, backward. They erased kingdoms, buried queens, renamed rivers. But now, Africa speaks back. We are not waiting to be discovered. We were never lost. From Timbuktu to Great Zimbabwe, our history was written in stone, song, and stars. Today, African scholars are rewriting textbooks. Filmmakers are restoring truth through image and sound. Artists reclaim symbols once used to oppress. We are not just reclaiming land, we're reclaiming the narrative. The internet has become our drumbeat. Diaspora voices echo across borders. Youth are questioning colonial names, flags, laws. We are digging up archives, translating oral histories, and lifting the veil on stolen legacies. Reclaiming history is not nostalgia. It's healing. It's restoring pride. It's power. Because when you control the story, you control the future. And Africa's future will no longer be dictated by those who stole its past. We are more than victims. We are visionaries. We are the descendants of warriors and wisdom keepers. The scramble for Africa took our voice. This time, we're taking it back. If this story inspired you, expanded your knowledge, or challenged your perspective, we invite you to like the video and subscribe to the African History. Join us as we reveal the untold truths of Africa's past.